You know, there's a unique kind of pain that comes when someone you care about just disappears from your life. No call, no text, no explanation. Just nothing. It happens way more than you'd think, and it's incredibly confusing. So today, let's get into the psychology of why people actually do this. I bet a lot of you are nodding right now, right? It's that awful feeling of being left in the dark, where you just replay every single conversation wondering, what did I do wrong? It's a really bewildering kind of loss, and boy, does it leave a mark. So, we throw around the word ghosting a lot, especially when we're talking about dating. But when this happens in a really significant, deep relationship, well, psychologists have a different term for it, and it points to a behavioral pattern with some surprisingly deep roots. Okay, let's really zero in on two phrases here: deliberate and coping mechanism. This completely changes how we look at it, doesn't it? This isn't just someone being flaky or forgetting to text back. A relational cutoff is a conscious choice, even if it's a desperate one, made specifically to deal with some kind of overwhelming emotional stress. So, what pushes someone to take such an extreme step? Honestly, it's almost never a simple or malicious decision. The reasons are pretty complex, and they usually come from a place of deep, deep pain or fear. So let's dig into the three main psychological drivers behind it. The first, and maybe the most powerful reason, is just basic survival. Yeah, really. When a relationship starts to feel emotionally or psychologically dangerous and nothing else has worked, cutting ties can feel like the only option left to protect yourself. And this really breaks down what that can look like. Maybe it's escaping a dynamic that's just constantly draining you or chipping away at your self-worth. For the person doing the cutting off, it's not about trying to punish the other person. It's about putting up a wall to shield themselves from what feels like just unbearable conflict or pain. Now, the second reason, this one goes a layer deeper, because often the decision to cut someone off isn't just about what's happening right now. It's about echoes from the past. Our personal history shapes how we react today in some really powerful ways. Think about it. Someone with a history of trauma might be hardwired for a flight response. So a conflict that seems totally manageable to you might feel like a life or death threat to them. It triggers those old wounds of abandonment or betrayal, and in that moment, severing the tie feels like the only way to get to safety. And then there's our third major driver. This is what happens when communication has just completely, utterly broken down. When words fail, actions become the only language you have left. And a cutoff, well, that's a very, very loud statement. And this is so crucial to understand. The silence is the message. This usually happens when someone feels like they've tried and tried to communicate what they need, and they just haven't been heard. Or maybe they have such a deep-seated fear of confrontation that they just can't bring themselves to say the words. So the cutoff itself becomes their final desperate message. I'm done. I can't do this anymore. But look, an act like this doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It creates this huge ripple effect. And it's so important to remember that there's often immense pain on both sides of that divide. It is never, ever a clean break. And this is where you really see the shared tragedy of it all. The person who leaves might feel this initial wave of relief, but that can easily turn into long-term guilt. And the problem that started it all, it's often still there. Meanwhile, the person who's left behind is just slammed with this storm of confusion and rejection that can really damage their ability to trust people down the road. In the end, nobody really wins. So when you put it all together, you look at the self-preservation, the trauma responses, the total breakdown in communication, it kind of forces you to shift how you see this whole thing. And that brings us to the real takeaway here. While being cut off feels incredibly cruel, the intent behind it usually isn't. More often than not, it's a clumsy, painful strategy for survival. It's what happens when someone feels like they have absolutely no other tools left in their emotional toolbox. It's an act of desperation, not malice. Which leaves us with this final, really powerful question to think about. Understanding the why behind it doesn't make the hurt go away. Of course not. But it does offer a new lens to see it through. It asks us to at least consider the hidden story that might be buried in all that silence.